This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. One thing that's not up to debate in my eyes is if Kevin Stefanski did enough to earn a contract extension. If you look at what the expectations were for the job when the job was given out and what the expectations usually are for a head coach to get a contract extension, Kevin Stefanski pretty thoroughly lived up to those expectations. If I would have told you that in 2020, when the Browns first hired Kevin Stefanski, you would have a 37-30 record over 4 years, 2 11-win seasons, 2 playoff appearances, a playoff win, and 2 Coach of the Year awards, you would have been pretty excited about whatever hire that would have been. So that means that that first contract for the Cleveland Browns and Kevin Stefanski was a success. And in that first contract, there are things that you allow to fly because you're trying to build a foundation. There are just a different bar that you measure things on when it's somebody's first contract, right? You're not expecting any coach to get to the Super Bowl on their first contract or their first time being a head coach in the NFL. You just want somebody who can demonstrate that they have potential to take this team to another level, that they are valuable to that team's success, and that they are somebody worth getting behind. And Kevin Stefanski has demonstrated all of those things. Also, when you're in a unique situation of hiring a coach for the Cleveland Browns, you also want to make sure, like, hey, is he better than what we've had in the past? And that bar, admittedly, was very low, right? If you're looking for best head coach since 1999, it's a low bar to cross, but was a bar that we wanted cross for the coach that's going to get an extension for the second time since 1999. So all of those things end up being true. You get Kevin Stefanski. He exceeds expectations in that first contract. He is undoubtedly the best head coach this team has had since 1999. But now that he's signed that second contract, now that he's been extended, all of that stuff does not matter as much anymore. Like Kevin Stefanski being the best coach the Cleveland Browns have had since 1999, cool factoid now, but not necessary in the evaluation of him now. We're not going to evaluate Kevin Stefanski on the same curve that we evaluated every other coach that has been a first-time head coach for the Cleveland Browns in years past. We're going to evaluate Kevin Stefanski amongst his peers now. And Kevin's resume holds up amongst his peers. It's pretty similar to what Kyle Shanahan had done over his first 4 years. So I'm not saying that he doesn't hold up. He's one of the few coaches in the NFL that has 2 Coach of the Years awards. I think he might be the only active coach that has that honor. So obviously his accomplishments in his first contract hold up against his peers. But as far as going forward goes, it does not matter that he coaches the Browns. It just matters that he lives up to the expectations that the Cleveland Browns have. So what are these new expectations for Kevin Stefanski? What changes for Kevin Stefanski now that he is the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, and not just the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, the head coach of the Cleveland Browns on their second contract? One of the things that I want to see with Kevin in year 2 is playoff appearances should be around the norm, right? There might be some situations where you have a ton of injuries, you don't make the playoffs. Okay, nobody's going to fault you for that. Or you might have a situation where the team is starting to do a little bit of a soft rebuild. They're not really expected to make the playoffs. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not expecting him to make the playoffs every year, regardless of anything that goes on. But what I do want from Kevin Stefanski is that these next few years, the playoffs are required. Like, you are trying to win it all this year, next year. Obviously, the playoffs are required. What's added on top of that, right? Because before, where we were just happy to get to the playoffs because the Browns hadn't been to the playoffs in a significant amount of time. Now, all that, like, we make the playoffs, fun stuff, it never happens, that's all gone in Cleveland. Like, we've made the playoffs 2 times in 4 years. We want to make the playoffs more. We're not just celebrating for making the playoffs. What you want, if you're the Cleveland Browns now, is playoff wins, right? Like, you want to get wins in the playoffs. Now, you got the 1 win in the wild card round against Pittsburgh, but you want more of that. You want to advance in the playoffs. You want for the next few years to feel like the Browns are a legitimate Super Bowl contender. When they talk about Dallas, when they talk about Philadelphia, when they talk about San Francisco, when they talk about Baltimore, Cincinnati, Kansas City, those teams that are in that upper tier championship contender class, you want the Cleveland Browns to add their name to that list. That's what Kevin Stefanski is going to be tasked with over the next 2 years. And that's where the expectations are going to rise with Kevin Stefanski, is being on that list of teams, right? It's not going to feel like a successful second contract if at no point during that second contract it feels like the Cleveland Browns are legitimate Super Bowl contenders. They need to be legitimate Super Bowl contenders over the next couple of years. You want to also see Kevin Stefanski, now that he's going to be here for an extended period of time, demonstrate more player development. This is something that he's done well, so it's not like he's on the hot seat on this. He's done this well in the past. You just want to see him continue to do it, right? More stories like David Njoku, more stories where you're developing somebody, right? Like Cedric Tillman is a guy who right now his development is looking a little bit shaky, but hopefully in a couple years we're talking about Cedric Tillman the same way we're talking about David Njoku. The Browns, Kevin Stefanski especially, they tend to have a bit of a stubbornness when it comes to their draft picks. They don't tend to give up on those guys easily, and that's a trait that I don't dislike about the Cleveland Browns, but it does need to pay off, right? We saw this with Grant Delpit, paid off great. With Anthony Schwartz, it did not pay off great. You want to see more stories like Grant Delpit, more stories like David Njoku, less stories like what's going on with Siaki Ika right now, where they're drafting somebody and it doesn't seem like they have a plan. You want to see the Cleveland Browns demonstrate that they're going to be a factory. And this is going to go into my video about Andrew Berry on Monday morning. But you want the Browns to demonstrate that they are a football factory, that they always draft people, they have guys in mind for certain roles, and you know, it doesn't have to be 100% hit rate, but you do want to have a more than 50% hit rate on these things where it's like, hey, we're going to bring in this guy to fill that role. He's going to fill that role or do something adjacent to that role. You got a good hit with like DeJuan Jones, right? You want to continue to do that. Also, one of the things that Kevin Stefanski is going to be asked to do in this second contract that's going to change his expectation level is something that he started to do. But he's going to have to deal with more staff turnover, the more success the Cleveland Browns have. If the Browns get to a Super Bowl, if they are Super Bowl contenders, if they win a Super Bowl, that means that they're going to have a hard time hanging to their assistant coaches, especially on the offensive side. Like if the Browns have a great couple of years offensively, you can imagine Ken Dorsey is going to become a head coach. And then you might promote Tommy Rees to the offensive coordinator position. And then if Tommy Rees does a great job with a quarterback there, here or there, then he's going to be promoted to a head coaching position, and you're going to have to constantly churn over some of this offensive roster. Now, luckily for the Browns, Jim Schwartz is not in the category of defensive assistant where people are thirsty to make him a head coach, so you might be able to hang on with him as long as he wants to coach. But on the offensive side of the ball, you have younger offensive coordinators. If Ken Dorsey has a couple of good years, somebody's going to take him away. If Tommy Rees has a couple of good years, somebody's going to want to take him away. Kevin Stefanski has to get comfortable with having some consistent turnover at that coordinator position, right? So he's going to have to kind of switch out guys. Maybe it's not a coordinator every year. Maybe it's a quarterback coach that gets plucked away and becomes an offensive coordinator somewhere else. You're going to have to deal with turnover. All successful teams do it. All successful teams lose key assistants and have to replace key assistants. And that is one of the most important things for a head coach to be able to have a grasp on And it's nice that he got a little bit of a head start replacing Alex Van Pelt, replacing Joe Woods, but he's going to have to do that more and more if this team becomes more and more successful. Another area where the expectations change on Kevin Stefanski is offensive evolution, right? As you're going to lose coordinators, as you're going to lose assistants, as all that churn is going to happen if you become more successful, the more and more you need to evolve. I've said this before, right? There are quarterbacks who have great early careers who don't evolve and pretty much their career flatlines by the time they're 30 years old. Like Carson Wentz is the biggest example of this, right? But Carson Wentz is the guy who flatlined. There are quarterbacks who adjust, like Ben Roethlisberger, who play a little bit more of a physical style, but adjust to playing a different level, evolve their game. Kevin Stefanski's going to have to do something similar with his offensive philosophy. He came into the game as a Gary Kubiak disciple. He got his job in Cleveland as a head coach by mastering the Gary Kubiak system, and he got some of his best seasons in the NFL by running the Gary Kubiak system. And while that's all good, you can't live on just running Gary Kubiak's offense your entire NFL career. You're going to have to find ways to adjust it, develop it, modernize it, and evolve the offensive approach. If you look at Kyle Shanahan and you compare him to what his dad did, that offense doesn't nearly resemble what Mike Shanahan used to do. And hell, it don't even resemble what Kyle Shanahan used to do in Cleveland. Like, there are some key things that are still there, but Kyle has evolved that offense. Even somebody like Sean McVay, who came into the league when he was hired as the Los Angeles Rams head coach, as somebody who was innovative and unique and creating all these new ways to get to defenses. He came in, he did his thing. Teams started to adjust to that. And if you look at what he's doing now, it's very different than what he did at the start of it. If you're a head coach, especially if you're an offensive focused head coach, you're always going to have to evolve. You're always going to have to update. What that offense looked like for the Browns in 2020 under Kevin Stefanski cannot be the same thing that the Browns offense looks like in 2024, 25, 26, and 27. And what it looks like in 2024 can't be what it looks like in 2030, right? You're going to expect a constant evolution. Look at Andy Reid. His stuff's changed dramatically over the years. Yes, there's some constants in there, but it's changed. It's evolved over the years. You're going to want to see that same evolution. You're going to expect that same evolution out of Kevin Stefanski the further and further he goes in his career. Now, one thing I will have to, I think everybody has to give credit to Kevin Stefanski for is he has this uncanny ability, or at least he's demonstrated this uncanny ability to make sure an offense is functional when literally everything goes wrong. You lose your quarterback, he figures out something with Jacoby Brissett or was it Case Keenum, all kind of backup quarterbacks, all kind of backup options, all kind of non-optimal things. He figured out a way to win a division game with DTR, and DTR didn't throw a pass past 25 yards. You see what I mean? He has this uncanny ability to make things work when things are dysfunctional, which is great. But I don't think Kev has reached his full potential in making offenses work when things are kind of functional around it. Like when everything's healthy, when the guys are there, can you make it look like what it's supposed to look like? We'll see this year with the healthy Deshaun Watson if Kev can get there. But it's one of those things where it's like, hey, it's cool that you can create magic out of chaos and create a serviceable offense out of pretty much nothing. And I think that's very impressive. But we need it to start to look better when it's supposed to look like what it's supposed to look like. When you have everything that you need, when you have your starting quarterback, we need it to look better than what it's been like when you've had it, because it's been very up and down in those scenarios. And while you'll take somebody who can Mike Tomlin offense their way to a decent season, that's always cool. We need that same level of consistency, but better when all the starters are in. So that's how my expectations change for Kevin Stefanski. It's going to be a different world for Kev as far as expectations. I think there were a lot of people holding him to second contract expectations in that first contract, but now he's finally in that second contract. Now he's going to be finally held to second contract expectations, and we'll talk about it as such. But that's this video. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.